The demand for coast-to-coast oil pipelines looks like it's staying strong, but we still don't have any concrete actions to see shovels in the ground. So joining us to chat more about this is Dan McTeague. Dan served as a Liberal MP for 18 years in Ontario and is now the president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. Many of you use Gas Wizard to check out local gas prices. Well, that's part of Dan's company as well. Dan, welcome. Great to have you with us once again.
It's great to be here. Really pumped to be here today to talk about something that hopefully will be Canada's help in the days to come.
For sure. Okay. So speaking of pumps, gas pump, let's get right to it. So Dan, a new Nano survey done at the beginning of June shows that 73% of Canadians support a national energy corridor and pipeline extending from Alberta to Eastern Canada. So it's interesting to see continued support for this post-election. So will it happen now that Bill C-5 has passed? What do you think?
Well, I think some of it will happen. The question is the devil's in the details. You're given the federal government extraordinary powers to be able to say, we want these things done. We want them done very quickly. The shortage in Canada has been electricity. The shortage in Canada has been oil and gas. Shortage in the sense of not being able to send to the rest of the world. We know that in the past few years, no fewer than a dozen of our greatest trading partners and allies in terms of NATO have come to us saying, listen, we need more of your natural gas. We need more of your oil. They didn't come here for windmills and solar panels and hydrogen. They came here for oil and gas, which is what most of the world functions on. 85% of our economies depend on it. Canada has a lot of it, but has chosen over the past 10 years to say no or hum and haw, or in the case of the previous prime minister, suggest that there's no business case, which I think to most people, even here where I am in Ontario, was absolute rubbish and nonsense. We knew it, save and except those who have no understanding of that every time they get on a cell phone or they're using their iPhone or taking transportation or many of the things we take for granted that are done because of oil and gas. So the question is whether the federal government will have allowed itself the permit, the power to be able to get oil and gas pipelines built, saving that. I don't see how building a hydro corridor from east to west is going to somehow, respond to Trump's tariffs, much less be able to resolve the problem. We have plenty of electricity. There's a lot to go around. I live in a province where we've had hydro for 50, 60 years, long before it was cool and trendy. So I guess the bottom line is I'll be looking very seriously to see whether or not Mark Carney shows his face once and for all and is prepared to build pipelines, oil and gas. Short of that, I think it's pretty clear that it's more of a doubling down on his net zero agenda, which has been very costly to Canadians.
Oh boy, any chance the Senate won't approve Bill C-5, or will they make any amendments?
Well, I understand that they're prepared to fast track it. And of course, then it goes through what's called a gazetting period. Having passed legislation in my life, including changes to the criminal code, when a government bill is passed, it usually takes 30 days to get through the Canadian Gazette, the publication, and then it's formally received as law of the land. So that gives the wide berth for the Mark Carney government to actually make good on its pledge to build pipelines. And there can't be any really mucking around here. I mean, they can't go around, turn around and say, well, there's no national consensus, or we're going to find a few people who are going to object to this. You're not going to find unanimity on anything in Canada. So for that reason, it's time to fish or cut bait, Mr. Carney. Is it going to be pipelines that are going to carry oil and gas, which the rest of the world needs, which would give Canada a significant economic boost? And I'm not just talking about for the oil sector. The economic impacts of wealth through distribution in this country through equalization can't be gainsaid. If we double the amount of oil and gas we sell in this country, we would be on fire. No deficit, no debt, loss of jobs, and loss of investment. So a lot at stake here. It seems to be a no-brainer. But there's always those out there who are grifting their way into working for various so-called charities and foundations who are going to find objections to these things. While at the same time, countries like China and India are going to continue to burn coal rather than burning clean Canadian natural gas.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting getting back to that survey there showing that momentum towards pipelines. It's showing that even Quebec has 60% support for it. Any chance of political change over there?
Well, yes, especially on natural gas. And, some people didn't notice it. I did. When Chrétien came out to the Liberal convention, had been invited to the leadership as he'd been sort of shunned over the past 10 years, as have many previous Liberals. His comment was, maybe not oil pipelines, but definitely natural gas. Why? Well, Quebec's sitting on what is the extension of the of the Marcellus shale play here in eastern Canada, which provides most of the natural gas that eastern United States, eastern Canada now uses. Quebec could exploit its own. The carbon footprint would be much less. And of course, it would be a solution to Quebec and hydro because they're running out of electricity. Yeah, all those dams that they built that are very invasive can't be done these days without massive consent from Indigenous communities. Spew methane for decades to come, as we're seeing with some of the major hydroelectric projects. They're running out of hydro. They're telling people with EVs, hey, don't charge up at night, and certainly don't charge in the dead of winter because we have to borrow more electricity from Ontario. So I think for Quebec, there's an option here, and natural gas is the way ahead. I don't want to be a spokesman here for natural gas. I think the industry will have to do some of its own, but it seems to me that if you want an affordable, practical, realistic solution that accords with the public's concerns, and yes, serves as a bit of a stopgap when you have people like Donald Trump, saber rattling, then yes, let's get our act together. The fact is, this should have been done 10 years ago. Why Canadians hummed and hawed and decided to vote to support parties that basically destroyed Canada's energy sector, and with it, investments in Canada, is any wonder. But maybe maybe it's taken 10 years of hard economic reality to get a lot of Canadians to finally, especially here in Canada, Eastern Canada, wake up.
Yeah, in Western Canada, so Alberta continues to push for new pipelines and coast-to-coast access to tidewaters. And BC Premier David Eby now says he's not against the pipeline, but he just doesn't want public money spent on it. Your thoughts on Eby's approach?
Well, David Eby is part of a government that caused Canadians to have to spend 34 billion bucks to a pipeline called the Trans Mountain Pipeline Extension, TMX, that would have cost the Canadian public zero. So, I'm glad Mr. Eby, the premier, as his previous predecessor, who I did happen to cross swords with many, many times in interviews, if he's prepared to have a conversion on the way to Damascus, so be it. But let's understand something very, very clearly. We have 34 billion bucks on the books because the provincial government of British Columbia hopped in on a pipeline that had been absolutely approved by the federal government. The federal government gave its stamp of approval even after Kinder Morgan had gone through hoops for 10 years to build that pipeline. When it finally did, the federal government said, well, we don't care if you get to be harassed by, groups, fanatics, climate activists, and whatnot. That's your fault. Then actually Kinder Morgan came back to the federal government and said, no, that's your responsibility. If you don't do it, we're going to sue you to the heavens. They virtually did. The finance minister of the day, not without going through histrionics on this, Morneau, realized it, bought the whole pipeline, and to build it cost us about 34 billion bucks. So if EB's saying as long as it doesn't cost the public, look, he's done enough damage. He's an expert and he's an authority on the province going out and causing significant damage to one pipeline. In my view, and I have no stake in the game, British Columbia and the NDP should be paying that 34 billion bucks, not Canadians. But be aside, if he's prepared to allow pipelines to get through British Columbia to whether that's LNG or that's oil, then I think that's a good thing in of itself, and I hold him to his word.
And then we have Alberta Premier Danielle Smith saying there could be a private company or a group of companies stepping up to the plate soon with a proposal to build a pipeline. Do you have any inside info on any of this, Dan?
No, I don't deal with the industry itself. In fact, when I do my gas price predictions, they're not very happy with me because they lose millions of dollars a year since I've been doing it for the past 30 years, ever since I wrote this little report in 1998 called the Liberal Committee on Gasoline Pricing when I was a backbench MP at the time. Really got me into the energy field, but not from perspective of the upstream, that is the oil and gas production and distribution. It actually had a lot to do with competition on the retail side and on the refinery side. Nevertheless, no, I have no intel that tells me where these companies are coming from. But look, they've been burnt badly. They have a federal Liberal government that has done its very best to block and to say no to pipelines and to keep bills on the books, acts on the book, like Bill C-69, which bans oil and sea-bound traffic on the Pacific West Coast to a large extent. Bill C-48, which in reverse does the same thing as well in terms of putting unusual requirements to building pipelines. The Liberals have not got rid of those things, and yet they have Bill C-5 that they've just passed. So I'm not sure which is going to win out at the end of the day. But as I said at the beginning, I really want the true Mr. Carney to show his face once and for all, because everything I read about this man is to block pipelines and is to shut down the oil and gas sector, is to double down on net zero and to strangle the oil sector from any type of financing. If he's changed in the past 5 years, even though he's published a lot of his book with a republication at the bottom saying, I'm now Prime Minister of Canada, if he's changed his view, then that would be remarkable. And as I said, that would be a little bit like Paul's conversion on the way to Damascus.
Yeah, will the real Mark Carney please stand up? Please stand up, right? Okay, so former Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault is now Canada's National Parks Minister, and he's been tasked with establishing 10 new national parks. So apparently one of the places being considered is in northern Manitoba, potentially blocking the path to a new port on Hudson's Bay to export oil and gas. So have you heard any updates on this?
Yeah, I mean, this is not surprising. This is the kind of tactics and miscreancy that we've seen that tends to block any potential, but it's going to get ironed out very quickly, and we'll find out if Mr. Guilbeault is still the activist in cabinet, or whether or not Mark Carney, on his way to making his conversion, is going to basically say, you want to keep your portfolio, you want to be the Lieutenant Quebec, this is none of your business. Yeah, you can have that park, but you're right in the middle of it. We are going to have a right of way that will ensure, if that's the route we take, that we can get oil to international markets. Why? Because we have a 50, 60, $70 billion deficit. We have a country that is running economically at levels that are as low as we've seen in the 1980s. And for that reason, necessity is the mother of inventiveness. Nice to be cool and trendy. But to use a word, I think Carney should be using this because it's not 2015 anymore.
Yeah. Let's touch base on the EV mandate. So at this time, they're saying by 2035, all new vehicle sales will have to be electric vehicles. But some EV plants in Ontario have been on pause. They've been put on pause, Dan. So this is causing at least temporary job losses. So is the need or demand just not there for them right now?
Yeah, look, electric vehicles, and I'm going to put my old cap in my work public relations, media relations for a little tiny company called Toyota Canada. When I left it, they were number 5 in Canada, number 2 or 3 in the world. Today, they're number one, and they're also number 1 in exports. So it's a company that said, yeah, we'll go along with the grift. We'll do things to make the government happy and avoid having to pay indulgence penalties to Tesla because they produce EVs. But we're not going to go down that road. I think the most serious hit to Canada's fantasies over having that as being our only mode of transportation, the only option we have when we buy, is when the Trump administration was elected on November the 4th, and with it, the pledge to get rid of the EPA variants, as well as, of course, getting rid of EV mandates, which the Biden administration had directly and indirectly put into place. I won't get into detail about that, but it means that Americans won't be buying when 93% of the cars you build in Canada, most of which are in my community here, Oakville, Milton, are sent to the United States. And suddenly there's no requirement in the for Americans to buy EVs. It means there's no market for this. And is it any wonder that short of government subsidies to entice consumers to buy these things, subsidies to have them build plug-ins, subsidies to build infrastructure for charging ports, subsidies for batteries, subsidies for automotive companies to build them. When you remove all those things, no one wants these things. There's a reason why 100 years ago, in the 1920s, no one wanted the electric vehicle. It's not to say it's bad. In some instances, it has great application. But to impose that on Canadians at a time in which there is no market either for auto manufacturers, and there isn't a sufficiently sized market in Canada for these things, with numbers dropping, it was an exercise in futility and stupidity.
Yeah, those numbers really aren't looking very good for EV production. Do you think that Carney might actually be forced to either repeal that mandate or make some amendments or delays?
Canadian automobile manufacturers are saying, no, we can't do this. A mixture of things. Internal combustion engines are far more efficient, more effective, less costly, and from a manufacturing point of view, less invasive. If I'm a Canadian, whether it's Ford or Stellantis or GM, they've all spoken very, very effectively in the past couple of months. This has got to end. This is stupidity 101. And anybody who thinks that you're barely able to get 1 in 10 people to buy one of these things under those circumstances, that you can get to 100%, is kidding themselves. And of course, if the federal Liberals want to pursue this, as they did carbon taxes, as they did with this fantasy, I think once Canadians realize just how damaging this is, they're going to basically take the Liberal Party and their net zero friends, put them on the 30-yard line and punt them right through the end zone.
Oh boy. Well, CFL season is just getting kicked off here. So there you go.
That's right.
All
Can't
right.
wait.
Dan,
Go Argos.
there you go. Thanks so much for chatting with us today, Dan. Great having you with
Thanks
us.
for having me today.
Dan McTeague is a former Liberal MP and is now the president of Canadians for Affordable Energy.